Prime Minister of Canada.
Is the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia. Every year, this is a day where we speak out against the stigma, discrimination, and violence that target the LGBTQ2 community. We need to show our solidarity tomorrow and every day. Homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia are never okay. We all have a role to play in building a Canada where everyone can be proud of who they are and whom they love. Peu importe où vous vivez,
wherever you live or what you do in life, your life has changed because of the pandemic. Your needs, your concerns, and your challenges are not the same as before because your situation is not the same either. Our government therefore introduced new programs to help us to get through this crisis, whether you're in studying or retiring, with or without a job. At the same time, we are planning to provide more support to organizations whose work is even more critical these days.
Start with some news on the medical front. Health Canada has now approved the first Canadian clinical trials for a potential COVID-19 vaccine at the Canadian Centre for Vaccinology at Dalhousie University. The National Research Council of Canada will be working with the manufacturers so that if these vaccine trials are successful, we can produce and distribute it here at home. Research and development take time and must be done right, but this is encouraging news. A few weeks ago, we announced $40 million for women's shelters and sexual assault centres across the country. And for Indigenous women and children fleeing violence, we're providing $10 million for emergency shelters. Our goal was to help these organizations take all the necessary steps to protect people not only from violence, but from COVID-19. To date, more than 500 women's shelters and sexual assault organizations have received additional support, including Inasmuch House in Hamilton, the Miramichi Emergency Centre for Women, the Saskatoon Interval House, and the South Okanagan Women in Need Society.
Community organizations such as Shelters for Women are a critical resource for the most vulnerable, and during the pandemic, their mission does not change. On the contrary, they are serving a larger clientele and must adapt to the realities of this pandemic. We therefore introduced an emergency fund that now has an envelope of $350 million. Most of that money will be distributed through various community organizations such as the Red Cross and United Way. The details with respect to the registration process will be published on our partner associations' websites, but organizations that need that support will be able to apply starting on Tuesday.
I now want to turn to what we're doing for parents. As you've probably heard, we're boosting the Canada Child Benefit for the month of May. You can expect to receive $300 more per child when you get your benefit this Wednesday. But that's not all. Starting on July 20th, we will increase the Canada Child Benefit once again for the upcoming year. Every summer for the past 3 years, we boosted the CCB to help keep up with the cost of living. And this summer will be no different. As the price of your groceries go up, so will the benefit.
We are already providing for targeted measures for students and parents because we are aware that these are the groups that are facing particular challenges because of the pandemic. But of course, there are still people we need to support. I'm thinking of women who are owners of their own businesses, who have suffered a disproportionate effect of the pandemic. Many have small businesses and are having problems with liquidity. Others work in sectors that are totally paralyzed because of COVID-19, such as restaurants and hotels. Now, the obstacles associated with this pandemic are added to the number of obstacles women often face, such as gender-based discrimination. In order to help those women during this crisis, our government will be investing $15 million in a new strategy for women entrepreneurs.
From the outset, Our number one priority has always been to protect the health and safety of Canadians, and we've been able to count on the Canadian Red Cross to do just that. They've been playing a key role in supporting Canadians during this crisis, helping both individuals and communities with their most pressing needs. But like many organizations, the Red Cross is facing an increased demand for its services at a time where they are getting fewer volunteers and receiving less in donations. So today, our government is investing $100 million to ensure that the Red Cross can keep responding to COVID-19 while also preparing for potential floods and wildfires.
I just want to close this morning by talking to the children and young people listening today. I know that the last few weeks have not been easy for you. You're anxious to see your friends and return to school, and yes, to have a break from your parents. For the teenagers who are members of the LGBTQ community, I know it's even more difficult. It's difficult at home, but I know as well that you're far from your support networks. But we will continue to be there for you. And I know that together we will come through this. Slowly, things will start to get better. So do continue to do your best at home and help your parents, because at the same time, that helps us to get through this as a society. Stay strong, and we will see each other on the other side. Thank you all very much.
We'll now go to the phones for questions. One question, one follow-up. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. For questions, star 1. Pour des questions, étoile 1. First question, Teresa Wright, the Canadian Press. Line open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Over the last several weeks, you have made comments suggesting help for the airline industry was coming. Now Air Canada is laying off more than half its workforce. Will specific help be coming for Air Canada and the airline industry as a whole, and how will it help the workers affected by these layoffs?
We moved forward quickly on support for people who got laid off, and then moved forward on a wage subsidy that has been drawn on by Air Canada and other airlines in order to support people across this country who, because, as you say, the airline industry is extremely affected by COVID-19, there hasn't been the work for them. We're going to continue to work with airlines across this country and make sure that they are drawing on the benefit packages that we put forward for workers through the wage subsidy. But we've also moved forward on a LEAF program for large employers, as well as looking at sectoral supports. We will continue to work directly with big employers across this country and various sectors and make sure that they have the support so we can all come roaring back once this pandemic is through.
And a follow-up, Teresa?
Thank you. You mentioned that Air Canada was using the wage subsidy, but this clearly hasn't been enough to keep employees on the payroll. Uptake on the wage subsidy program has been low overall. What is this telling you about the help that will be needed for businesses over the longer term?
I think one of the things that businesses need is confidence to know that we are going to be there. And just about every day I come out and reassure people that the government will be there to support businesses, to support workers, to support families through this difficult situation. We just announced on Friday that we will be extending the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy until the end of the summer in order to make sure that companies can rehire people, keep them on their payroll, because we know that the best way to bring the economy back quickly and efficiently is if people continue to have that link with their employer, even as we go through the containment measures we have to. Nous savons que c'est un grand défi pour
We know that it's a major challenge now for large companies, including the airline sector, when it comes to supporting their employees. And that's why we introduced the wage subsidy. And that's why we have been working with various companies across the country to support them. We know there's more that needs to be done, and we had the certainty behind that, and it was the reason why we extended the wage study. And we will continue to ensure that people can keep their attachment to their employer so that we can return quickly once this pandemic is over.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Mélanie Marquis, La Presse. À vous.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. The fact that 20,000 people are being laid off at Air Canada, what does that say to you about the wage subsidy? Do you think more needs to be done? And could the government again nationalize Air Canada as has been done in the aerospace sector? Well, we know that this is an extremely challenging situation now for airline companies, and that's why we introduced measures across the economy to support workers, including in the airline industry. We will be working closely with companies like Air Canada to see what more we can do to support them.
I think we all know that this pandemic has hit extremely hard on travel industries and on the airlines particularly. That's why we're going to keep working with airlines, including Air Canada, to see how we can help even more than we have with the wage subsidy.
Follow up? Yes, just coming back to the idea of nationalization, have you ruled out the possibility of nationalizing Air Canada? And could there be a bailout for this company? Well, we will be working with lots of different sectors and lots of companies to ensure that they can come through this pandemic, and we'll be talking to Air Canada and other airlines as well to see what the options are to support the tens of thousands of workers who are part of their workforce.
Ashley Burke, CBC News. Good morning. The wage subsidy and the bridge loans, they were not enough to prevent Air Canada from planning these major cuts. What does that tell you about the future of this industry in particular and the effectiveness of these programs? And is it possible that some might not survive regardless of government support?
This is a pandemic that has hit extremely hard in all sectors of the economy, and it is something that we are all trying to figure out how to get through the best possible way. But certain sectors have been hit even harder. Obviously, tourism, airlines are the kinds of things that people simply are not drawing on right now. That's why we're going to keep working with various sectors, keep working with specific companies to try and see what the best way through of supporting workers who depend on those industries for their livelihoods, but also look at how we can make sure that Canada comes through this intact and even in a good position for the future. We will continue to work with the sectors and industries that have been very hard hit by this pandemic. We will do everything we can to ensure that Canada can come out of this situation in good shape, and we will always be seeking to support workers and families across the country.
MPs has said in writing to a member of the public that there will not be a bailout for the airline industry coming. Is he right?
We're going to continue to work with sectors and industries to try and support them as they get through this pandemic. We put in place the large enterprise emergency finance facility, LEAF, to be able to support companies with liquidity over this time of the pandemic. It is not a bailout. It is a loan that is going to help them get through. But we are still working with companies to see who's taking that up and how those the format of it will be worked out. Okay. Nous avons mis en place de l'aide du crédit additionnel.
Provided additional credit and made that available to employers, and we will be working with different companies, perhaps airlines as well, to offer more liquidity to them in these difficult times. Christian Noël, Radio-Canada. Cities are pretty much in a difficult position because they're being asked to help with the healthcare community, but things are not doing well. They have less revenues coming in. Now, are you aware of this? Have you discussed this with the provinces? And what can you do? Well, I had my 9th discussion with the premiers on Thursday evening, and we talked about the circumstances which are particularly difficult for our cities and municipalities as a result of this crisis. they provide a lot of services to citizens, but they're seeing their revenues decline drastically. So obviously, we respect the fact that Canadian cities are a provincial responsibility. We have no intention of interfering in that responsibility, but we have said to the provinces that we want to be there to support them so that we can help the provinces to ensure that the cities remain healthy.
I think we talked directly about this on Thursday evening in my First Minister's meeting, the 9th of this pandemic, with the premiers, where I highlighted my concerns that Canada's big cities and indeed municipalities of all sizes across the country are facing significant challenges as they continue to deliver services in difficult situations for their citizens, while at the same time seeing massive drops in revenue. We respect, of course, and we know that cities are the responsibility of the provinces, but I highlighted that the federal government is eager to hear from the provinces how we can support cities. It has been very important for me as Prime Minister over these past 5 years to be supportive of our cities, and we're continuing to look to do so, but recognize the provincial jurisdiction in this.
Deux choses en suivi. Est-ce que vous êtes en train de dire que
First of all, are you saying that the help that could be given to the cities is slower now because you can't agree on that with them? And also, they need support now. There are cities that have already had to lay off municipal employees, and cities like Edmonton that are thinking of reducing their public transit services as a result of this. So, one, will you talk to the cities so that they can get that help quickly, and will they be able to get it as early as this summer? Well, as I said, we have discussed this already, and all of us, the premiers and myself, all agree that we have to support the cities. The federal government will be there as a partner to support the provinces in the work that they have to now carry out to support their cities.
We all agree across First Ministers that we need to do more to support cities, and I have assured them that the federal government will be there to support the cities in what they choose to do, what they need to do, to support the provinces in what they need to do to support cities.
Hi, Prime Minister. Crystal Logue with Global News. Beyond the wage subsidy and already announced programs, will there be any industry-specific supports for smaller airlines in Canada that don't meet certain thresholds for support?
We've put in place a support for sectors and large employers, and that is something that we're moving forward on. Industry Canada is engaged closely with various sectors. We recognize that certain areas are harder hit than others. Airlines is a great example of something that was going well before the pandemic, where we are going to need airlines afterwards. We need to make sure we can support them through in the right way that makes sense for Canadians, and that's what we'll do.
But will there be any specific supports for this industry?
As I said, we're working with the industry, we're working with sectors to see what kind of supports would be right, both for Canada and for them.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Mackenzie Greer with CTV. Air Canada right now is losing about $1 million an hour. They lost $1 billion last quarter. They're only flying about 5% of the flights they're using. And now that they're laying off about half their staff and are choosing not to use the wage subsidy. You said before that Canada needs to have a strong airline sector after this. So if that's the case, is the federal government willing to take an equity stake in Air Canada to make sure that they stay alive?
We will have conversations with Air Canada, as we will with airlines across the sector, to try and see how the best way to get through this particular pandemic is. We know that airlines are incredibly hard hit by this pandemic, and we will be there to work with them to see how best we can help.
One of the things that Air Canada mentioned is that, yes, we can get the wage subsidy from the federal government, but the major issue for them financially was the fact that they had to still pay their pension and health benefits out. Is the federal government considering any additional changes to the wage subsidy that would include these programs to allow larger businesses to still keep people employed?
We're going to work with large businesses like Air Canada to ensure that workers, employees, pensioners are protected during this situation. Our focus will always be on supporting Canadians and their families. That's what we're going to talk with industry and companies about. Nous allons toujours nous assurer d'appuyer
We will always ensure that we are supporting workers, retirees, and companies in Canada. That's our priority. And that's what we will be discussing with the various companies out there who need help.
Ça semble être une annonce que vous voulez souligner. Qu'est-ce que vous pouvez dire aux familles? À quelle rapidité on va recevoir tout ça?
What can you say to families about how quickly they will be receiving that? We will be increasing the Canada Child Benefit. We know that families are facing additional hardship, and starting next Wednesday, you will be receiving $300 more per child through the Canada Child Benefit. Furthermore, in July, as we have done every year in the last 3 years, we will be again increasing the child benefit to ensure it keeps pace with the cost of living so that you can pay for whatever your family needs. We have always supported families and will continue to do so. Thank you all very much.
All right, that is the Prime Minister.